them to, so they can get to the store, or get to a doctor's office.
That was Maggie Crane's boss, Mayor Slay, last week with Tony Messenger, talking about the MetroLink expansion. Joe Miller, policy analyst with the Show Me Institute. Good morning, Joe Miller.
Good morning.
How'd you get to work today?
I actually took the MetroLink.
You love the MetroLink.
I've used the MetroLink.
You use the MetroLink more than anybody. You have a monthly pass and everything.
Well, not a monthly pass, but I'm a regular user, I would say.
All right, and you are a regular payer of
yes.
the MetroLink. So I would think you would love the fact that Mayor Slay wants to expand MetroLink.
There are probably people who would benefit more than me, but I would benefit pretty substantially from any expansion of transit in the area. But yet, I actually think it's a bad idea from just a public policy perspective for the city itself.
Why?
Well, the big point here is that light rail, like a lot of different types of rail, is incredibly expensive to install. And if your real goal is to improve public transportation or to improve development in the city, there are ways to do it that don't involve spending billions of dollars expanding an underused system.
MetroLink hasn't been a runaway success. Don't people love the current Metro system and the MetroLink system we have now?
Well, people use the MetroLink. I mean, I use the MetroLink. And the entire transit system in St. Louis City and St. Louis County is geared to be used to actually route into the MetroLink. So it's almost unavoidable if you use public transportation that you're going to use it.
Right.
But if you actually look at what the goals were for the MetroLink when it opened, if you talk about transit ridership, or if you talk about urban development, these goals, they haven't been met. I mean, if you look in the early 90s before the first line opened in 1994, more people were actually just riding the bus in 1991 than use either the bus or the MetroLink today. Also, the Shrewsbury line that opened, the line that I actually used to get here, MetroLink ridership, just the MetroLink, just light rail ridership, was actually higher before the line opened than it is today.
Really?
Yeah, that's true. It's crazy, but when you expand a system like this, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get that many new riders. And in the case of St. Louis, because people seem to be opting for personal vehicles, 96% of people who commute in St. Louis City and County are using either cars or walking. They're not using public transportation. Just because you build a rail system doesn't mean you're going to have hugely increased ridership.
Right. However, the road that goes by my house is a money loser. However, I still need it to get to work.
Well, whether or not a road is a money loser is a good question, because we have as we've talked about many times before, we have this incredibly low gas tax in this state, and yet we somehow manage to build all these highways. And the local roads, those things are for getting out of your house, they're for driving, but they're also for people who are biking, and they're also for the bus system. Those are multi-use sort of tracks. I would compare transit not to a road and a rail, but it's comparing, having a road and then driving everybody around to having another system of transportation. And if you can actually provide good service in the transit realm without spending an exorbitant amount of money, that's definitely the direction you should go.
Right. What about the argument, Joe Miller from the Policy Institute at Show Me Institute? MetroLink doesn't go where people need to go. So if you build more lines, it will open up more access and more people will be able to use it.
That argument just gets repeated ad nauseum no matter how far you build a system. St. Louis's major problem is that with rail transit ridership is that we have a dispersed region in terms of where people live and where people work. More people actually work in the Chesterfield-Creve Core area than work downtown. Most people live and work in St. Louis County these days in this region. But yet, when we see the MetroLink, it's a hub and spoke system coming out of the downtown core. So how is that going to be more useful for people? Really, this city should be relying more on buses. It doesn't really have the population density to make rail transit really worth it, to really give it a good bang for the buck.
So you would rather see buses?
Well, when you look at what we've spent on the MetroLink, we're talking a subsidy of between $8 and $9 for every passenger who's ever stepped on board the MetroLink, which is a crazy subsidy, especially when, if you're running an efficient bus system, sometimes maybe you're only subsidizing maybe $1 or 50 cents or 20 cents for every passenger who steps on board.
Right.
So the difference is huge, and it's because of the infrastructure costs.
Right. What about the trolley down Delmar? Isn't that going to be a boon to people moving back and forth?
I don't get that one. There's already, a streetcar is as slow as a bus or slower, depending on how they run it, and also the MetroLink already goes from Forest Park to the Loop. So this seems redundant in every possible way, but there's 30 or 40 or 50 million dollars down the drain on that one. But people, and I think you can tie that up to the same impulse that's pushing this $1 billion, maybe $2 billion MetroLink expansion, an obsession with rail that's inappropriate for the realities of the St. Louis region.
Really interesting. I just got back from Boston, took the MetroLink or the subway, whatever they call it, to Fenway Park, to the airport. It was a great way to get around Boston.
Boston is much more dense than St. Louis. It's not even close. St. Louis, if you talk about the size of the metropolitan area, I believe we're either 17th, 18th, or 19th in total population, right? But if you just take 10 miles from City Hall, just go out 10 miles from the downtown, we're actually the 31st densest region in the area, which means that, we act like we need these huge systems, but we're not doing things that are appropriate for St. Louis. We are reaching for things that make us part of the cool kids club. And I think that people are just in the belief that rail is that thing when it really doesn't need to be.
Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Miller gives you another point of view, the policy analyst at the Show Me Institute. Where can we read more about this stuff?
Well, you can read everything we write about this at showmeinstitute.org.
Joe, have a good week and enjoy your MetroLink back to work.
Thanks for having me.
All right, 8:45 here, Big 550.